Greetings, warm greetings from Redwood City and from Insight Meditation Center. And I would like to begin this morning by reading a story from this little book of mine called The Monastery Within. A nun asks the abbess, "Who was the Buddha really?" Smiling and leaning forward mischievously, the abbess said, "Don't you already know?" Confused by this answer to her question, the nun felt overwhelmingly self-conscious. She couldn't find the words to even say she didn't know. The abbess then explained, "To know who the Buddha is, you have to start with something simple. Take breathing, for example. Like you just now, the Buddha breathed. When you are aware of your breathing, you are aware of physical experiences the Buddha knew as he breathed. When you see how your breaths arise and pass away, it is just as the Buddha saw his breaths arise and pass away. Like you just now, the Buddha experienced physical sensations in his body. When you see that the physical sensations you experience through the day arise and pass away, it is just as the Buddha saw his sensations arise and pass away. Like you right now, the Buddha experienced pleasant and unpleasant feelings. When you see directly how your experiences of pleasure and pain arise and pass away, it is just how the Buddha saw pleasure and pain come and go. Like you right now, the Buddha had thoughts. When you see those thoughts come and go, you are experiencing how the Buddha saw thoughts arise and pass away. Like you right now, the Buddha experienced particular states of mind. When you see your states of mind arise and pass away, you are experiencing how the Buddha saw his mind states arise and pass away. Like you right now, the Buddha was aware of himself. When you see how your ideas of who you are arise and pass away, you are experiencing how the Buddha saw his ideas of self arise and pass away. Hearing this, the nun became aware of her experience as it was happening in the present moment. In a way she never imagined possible, she felt physically close to the Buddha. Rather than someone who lived thousands of years ago, she sensed the timelessness in which no time separated her from the Buddha. "I understand," said the nun. "Is this all I need to know?" In reply, the abbess said, "No, there is one more thing. When you see clearly that clinging to breathing, sensations, feelings, thoughts, states of mind, and self also arise and pass away, then you will know who the Buddha is. Then you will be free." So as we sit here today, all things that you experience directly will in fact come and go, arise and pass away, except for the ways in which you think about them. But those thoughts themselves arise and pass away. Often when we don't see the arising and passing of things, it can represent some form of clinging, very subtle maybe in the mind, of hanging on, holding on. But even that arises and passes away. The art of delving deep into meditation is to delve deeply into what is here, in the most intimate, immediate, and touching way, touching in the sense, the Buddhist sense, of being right there where the sense contact arises, where contact is made with each moment's experience. So taking a comfortable, alert posture, in gentling yourself, gently closing your eyes, and gently taking some larger, deeper breaths, and gently exhaling and settling into your body. No hurry, no ambition, just gently breathing in and settling in. Breathing in and connecting to the body. Breathing out and settling into this body. And then letting your breathing return to normal. And gently relaxing the muscles of your face. Gently relaxing the shoulders, allowing the shoulders to settle a bit. Gently softening in the face. And gently softening, relaxing in the belly. And then sitting here in the immediacy of your body, your direct experience, and perhaps allowing there to be further gentling, being gentle with yourself, with your meditation, and in the gentleness where there's maybe a care and a tenderness to experience whatever is happening for you, whether it's difficult or whether it's pleasant, a gentling of experience. And centering yourself on your breathing. And the breathing, the inhales will come and they'll go. The exhales will appear, and then at some point the exhale will disappear. If you have particular thoughts about the inhale, soon enough it'll be gone. If you have particular thoughts about the exhale, perhaps by the time of the next inhale, the thought is no longer there. Or perhaps you have thoughts and you're lingering with the thoughts. You're involved with the thoughts so much you don't see or allow for the thoughts to come and go. and a gentle attention to the breathing, kind of like awareness. Your mindfulness is soft cotton ball that gently touches or is gently touched by the experience of breathing. A gentleness of awareness that's open, so that when sensations of the body arise and pass, they arise and touch the softness of awareness. Sounds arise and they touch the soft cotton of awareness. No resistance to anything, no hardness, just aware. Feelings touch awareness. Thoughts occur and they touch the awareness of mindfulness. And they go. All things come and they go in their moment-to-moment manifestation. when we can be with the immediacy of direct experience, where the contact, where the touching of experience happens with awareness. There's the opportunity there is to allow yourself to be touched by experience without any clinging, without any wanting and not wanting, or without any being for or against. Just allow things to come and go, to be present in the softness or freedom of awareness. And if there is clinging or for or against, it's okay. There's a way in which we allow ourselves to be touched by that. And in the direct experience of contact, of seeing, perhaps you'll see that that too is inconstant. That too comes and goes. And the arising and passing of experiences happens continuously, like a stream or a river of experience. See if you can let go of your thoughts and concerns enough that you can let go into that stream and river of experience that flows by, that comes and goes. Maybe even let go, and if you really feel the inconstancy of change, let go into it. So you become the change. You become the river of things coming and going, appearing and disappearing. And if there's things which don't appear and disappear, don't worry about it. But for now, maybe let go into the things that are flowing, streaming, appearing, disappearing. Relax, quiet the mind. A gentle immersion in the river of experience. The Buddhist word for sense contact literally is touch. And it's used for all sense contact, including sense awareness of how we see the inner life, our thoughts, our feelings. Awareness is touched by things. To remain close, gently, calmly close to the immediacy of our direct experience can also allow us to be touched by the suffering of the world, to be touched by the difficulties that people have, challenges that others have, to be aware of that gently, a gentleness of allowing ourselves to be touched without getting alarmed or without getting contracted. As if those things also are allowed to come and go. It's okay. But allow ourselves to be touched so that our love, our care, and our compassion, our kindness can come to the foreground. When we're alarmed or distressed or contracted or turn away from, then our love and our compassion, our care will be absent. To be relaxed, calm, to trust. It's enough to be touched. And to allow in the gentleness of the heart for there to also be our care for the world. The gentle care from which we can speak and act and think in ways that are for the betterment of the world, that cares for others and benefits them. And so we're coming to the end of a meditation session. It might be more inspiring for you to stay close to the mindfulness practice. Stay close to the moment-to-moment experience. Stay calm and present so that your interactions with others can be motivated by a friendliness, a kindness, a warmth, love, compassion, whatever is needed for the people you're with or the people you're considering. May it be that this meditation practice we do is directly applicable to our contribution for making this a better world for all beings. So greetings again, and today we're coming to the end of this series on the Four Noble Truths. And in this penultimate talk, we're talking about the fourth Noble Truth. And I want to now say what I've said repeatedly, that there are many interpretations of these Four Noble Truths. And probably all of them exist because someone found it beneficial, and that different interpretations are beneficial in different contexts, in different situations of our life. And to know different interpretations means we have a bigger toolbox by which to meet our life and respond to our life hopefully in a wise way. The most common interpretation of the Four Noble Truths goes something like this: that there is suffering in the world, not that life is suffering, but to the degree to which there is suffering, the suffering has a cause. And that cause is represented by the word craving, the clinging, the compulsive kind of wanting that exists for human beings, maybe a kind of addiction sometimes, attachment. And the cessation of that of suffering involves a letting go, the abandonment, the putting down of that craving, that clinging, that attachment. However, it's not easy to do so. These attachments that we have can be very, very deeply rooted. They can be deeply even subconscious. We can't even see some of the ways that we're attached. And sometimes our suffering, we know we're suffering, but it's just a big mass of suffering. We don't see any causes and conditions for it. It's just we're just feeling lousy and bad. So because of the challenges of letting go deeply and experiencing this freedom from suffering, there is a path. There's a set of practices a person can do that sets the conditions in place, that begins clearing the field, helps us to settle, helps us to see deeply and clearly, helps the mind develop its capacity to see deeper and deeper into what's going on, that we can really come to the place of liberation. And that path is represented in the Four Noble Truths by the Eightfold Path. So the practice for the cessation of suffering is the Noble Eightfold Path, or it's the path of the noble ones. It's a path for those who become ennobled. So the path towards freedom. And so it's a wonderful set of 8 practices that are not beliefs that we have to believe, but practices that we engage in that begin changing how we are, change the conditions who we are. They allow us to live in a more contented way, more settled way. The middle parts of the Eightfold Path have to do with ethics, have to do with sila, with our behavior, not to live by the precepts and speak properly, and speak without causing harm, and have livelihood that doesn't cause harm. And if we could live a life of harmlessness, it's easier to be relaxed about ourselves, to feel good about ourselves, and we don't have the agitation and the regrets and all the things that make it hard to settle. It's useful to go about the world with the right attitude, the right intention, and to go around with the intentions of being hostile or unfriendly or being greedy for pleasures is not a very conducive way of living a life if what a person wants is to really settle enough in the mind, quiet the mind, calm the mind, open oneself deeply so that we can really connect to what's going on in a much deeper way inside to find our freedom from suffering. So then the second of the factor of the Eightfold Path is this right intention, right attitude, which is sometimes defined as an attitude of compassion, or sometimes as an attitude of harmlessness. More literally, it's harmlessness and an attitude of non-ill will, of goodwill, of kindness, friendliness. And thus attitude is not like you should do this, like a requirement. It's more like if what you want is to create the conditions for a mind, a heart that's settled enough to really be present for experience, it helps if you live with these attitudes, live with these approaches, intention. And then it helps also to cultivate mindfulness, to really be settled and practice a lot of mindfulness. The more we can practice, the more prepared we are for the difficulties of life. To finally start to be mindful when things are difficult might be too late. We don't have the inner strength to do so. And the same thing with concentration. That developing mind's capacity to be really focused, calm, unified, present is one of the great pleasures of life. And it also helps us, again, to encounter suffering, to encounter ourselves in a deep way and an effective way. And then right effort, the endeavor to live well. And then we come, so I'm kind of going through them all quickly and out of order, but then the first one is right view. And right view has many interpretations or many explanations for what it is. And it has to do with the context. The core understanding is that right view is seeing the world through the framework of the original idea of the Four Noble Truths. There is suffering, the arising of suffering, the cessation of suffering, and this, seeing the arising and ceasing of suffering, this is the way forward. It's more of a meditative experience. It's really deep, being with the arising and passing experience. That's the classic idea of right view. The Buddha also gave other ideas of right view. And some of them are more practical for everyday life. And one of the very important ones, it has to do with causality or consequence. That what we do has consequences. That we don't do things and and there's no traces, nothing left over. That if we act with skillful intentions, skillful qualities will come somehow, be supported and be developed. If we do things with unskillful things, unskillfulness is developed and suffering occurs. So act with hate, and the results of hate are not pleasant. Act with love, the results of love done wisely have good results. Generosity, wisdom, all these things. And that what we do and how we do things are not inconsequential. Even what we think and how we think about things is not inconsequential for the purposes of becoming free. If you're interested in the path of freedom, this is not a moral obligation or a moral judgment on things, but rather it's a very practical concern that if you're interested in the freedom from suffering, then you want to take into account a lot of care with how you behave and the conditions you set in place and being careful to put good consequences into place. I mean, so it could be so simple as maybe if you drive to work and you're always harried because you're always leaving in the last possible minute, the consequences of that, you get to work harried and you're not particularly kind to people or happy when you get there. So maybe you leave home 5 minutes early, so you can drive in a relaxed way and drive much more calm. And that sets the conditions for a better circumstance for continuing to be attentive and practice as we go through our life. So the idea being that there are all these sets of practices that are actually very wise things to do, to learn those 8 sets of practices, have them under our belt, understanding of them, and pick them up at different times in different circumstances. And if there can be really good for beginners in Buddhism to do, and they're good for people who have been practicing for some times, and they're good for people who are quite experienced in Buddhism. The Eightfold Path is always part of the path, always part of the deal of Buddhism. It's kind of like defines the core practices of Buddhism, this Eightfold Path. And so in this interpretation I'm giving today, the Eightfold Path is good for beginners. Know your suffering, know the cause, whatever way you can, let go of that cause, and if you can't let go of it or want to go further on this, cultivate the Eightfold Path. And what I said yesterday, the Eightfold Path is also so so that's a prescription. The Eightfold Path is a prescription of what to do. The Eightfold Path is also presented as a description of what liberated people are like. That once a person becomes really free of attachments and clinging, their life, how they live their life, is in fact defined or described by the Eightfold Path, even without actively doing it, because it's the absence of clinging that leads us to do these good things. Without clinging, there's no unethical behavior, is the Buddhist definition of it. So when you really let go of clinging, you will follow the ethical pieces of the Eightfold Path, and so forth. So this is very interesting that for beginners we have the Eightfold Path. For the people who are really awakened, there's the Eightfold Path. And so they kind of represent both the life of a beginner and someone's advanced. And so I like to think of that the practice that we do, any practice we do, the practice of the Eightfold Path, meditation and all that, it mirrors or contains elements of the goal, of freedom itself. And one of the ways to practice is to allow ourselves to practice so that the means contains part of the goal. That not consider the goal and the means so separate from each other, but to allow the goal to be inhabit or to be embodied in the very means, in how we practice. And what this means is that whatever practice we're doing in Buddhism, that we're being very careful that we're not clinging as we do it. We're not being ambitious or selfish or conceited or or hard on ourselves or disappointed or critical of ourselves or how we're doing. All that represents a kind of going in the opposite direction of the practice. Rather, to include the goal in the means that even for a beginner of practice, we take on these practices kind of with an open hand, with a kind of lightness or gentleness, or just a radical simplicity, without needing it to be a certain way, or wanting it to be a certain way, or pushing, or clinging, or having it to be a certain way. But to enter into the practice with a generosity and an openness and a clarity or a calmness, whatever degree of non-attachment, non-clinging we can have. In particular, a kind of a gentleness and an openness and non-clinging to our clinging that we have. So we're not using as we do this practice, we learn to recognize and see much more clearly what's going on for us. It's an introspective practice, and we see our clinging and our hostility and our greeds and all the things that we have. And so rather than using that to suffer more, we try to meet it, to be touched by it. So we hold it gently and kindly, supportively. We don't get involved with it, we don't condone it, but we also don't criticize it or get contracted or get angry or mean about it. So the fact that the Eightfold Path, in different ways of seeing it, is a beginner's practice and advanced practitioner's practice. It's the practice, it's the life of those who have let go of clinging. And it's the areas where we practice non-clinging, right from the beginning of practice. Right from the start, we kind of, okay, let's do right view, right intention, right action, right speech, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. This is what we do, but let's be careful how we do it. Let's do it with determination, with clarity, with dedication, with love, but also without further clinging, without further using it as material to be critical of ourselves. Because if Buddhism at the heart of it is the end of suffering, there's a path to the end of suffering, please don't use Buddhism and Buddhist practice as another reason to suffer. That doesn't make any sense, right? So please, as you engage in this Buddhist practice and the Buddhist teaching, be careful that you don't suffer because of it. Don't use it as something to be critical of yourself or critical of other people. They're not living up to a Buddhist standard. Always keep close by that as we walk this Eightfold Path, we walk the path of Buddhism, we're doing it so we don't suffer. And so that the goal is found in the means. Maybe only a hint in the beginning, but that the goal grows and develops and expands as the means incorporates the goal more and more into it. So rather than a goal out there in the future, the goal is already here, and we're expanding it, we're developing it, growing it, until it's fully mature in us. So, the Eightfold Path. So, thank you very much for today, and tomorrow will be the last talk of this series on the Eightfold Path and the Four Noble Truths. And then at the end, tomorrow I'll take a little bit of time for, if you want to stay and ask some questions in the chat, that would be wonderful. Thank you.